what I try to do is I try to imagine that book is watching this and he's gonna like be talking all this shit and whatever. And so I try to think like, what would that dumb fuck say about this? And like,
Wait, the last time I saw you stream, you were in a bed. So I assume that you always stream in your bed.
just places that are comfy. Today the chair is comfy, so I'm trying to be civilized for you.
Oh, yeah. No, that totally works. So yeah, like how have you been doing lately?
I think lately I've been like a lot less busy, like not working on stream stuff, but more like behind the scenes stuff and getting better at making that run smoothly. And I think that that's been a better way to spend my time a little bit. It's been refreshing not to have to stream as much.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. The people told me that I had to stream like tons and tons of hours, but I find for me, yeah, I feel so much better streaming a smaller amount, but just making sure those streams are really high quality. So, and it's worked out.
That's good.
Yeah.
And you feel better about them at the end of the day too, because you're like, man, I knocked that one out of the park. It's better than having like 3 or 4 where it's like one of those was good, the other 3 were kind of like meh. You know, just having the one and knowing that you did it well I think that feels better. So I'm in that boat with you.
That's the best feeling ever when you know, like at the end of a stream and you turn it off and you're just like, man, I created good content today. Like, you're really proud of that. So happens to me rarely, but when it does, it feels great. So can you tell me about like what kind of got you into streaming? Like how did this all kind of work?
Yeah. I initially reached out to Destiny because there were some people who were trying to convince him to take more seriously like the optics of statements that he was making or some of the rhetorical choices that he was making and how those were like hampering his ability to connect with people or to get his questions answered or have what he calls like a good debate. And it was unfortunate to see a lot of people who are not very well spoken, who are not good communicators, come on and try to convince him of that. So I reached out. I told them about my background. Before doing streaming, I wrote papers for people. So if you needed like any of your college papers written, I would help with that. Or if you were a graduate student and needed like drafting help or editing help or research help, or you're just confused and you need like guidance, I worked on that kind of stuff. So I had a fairly good understanding for like the way arguments would work and the way that they come across to people. And I've dealt with a lot of people who are supposed to be very, very, very smart, you know, because they're at a very, you know, high level of their field or whatever. And I've seen the difficulties that they have in communicating with novices or with people that are just not informed. And that's been a gap that I've had to cross being a tutor. So I'm kind of aware of how to navigate that. And I helped him. It went well. People liked it. So I decided to take a swing at streaming. And then, you know, I continued.
That's cool. So how did Destiny take to you, you know, giving him constructive criticism?
It's tough to remember how he took it at the time because he was a lot more we were both a lot more timid in the conversation. We were both a lot more like we weren't as forceful, you know, because I had just gotten to know him. So it's tough for me to know how he took those necessarily because he's a tough dude to read. And then when he starts to like take in criticism, I feel like either he does it very passively where he's like, okay, is there anything else you want to, you know, and then he wants to move past it.
Yeah, that
he's
sounds
going
like
to
him.
think about it. Or he just gets very, very upset when he doesn't agree with it, or he doesn't think that it's like, or he thinks it's like unfounded criticism. And at that point, it's very difficult to get through to him, I think.
So I'm guessing there have been moments where you gave him criticism and it just did not go over well, or he really disagreed with it?
Yeah, I think most recently with his talk with Richard Wolff, that was a good example of that. But yeah, there have been a lot of times involving Hassanabi as well, where it's like, I think that Hassan comes off really good in this conversation because he's doing this and you're doing this and nobody understands what the heck you're doing. When I'm bringing up people that he really doesn't like and trying to like convince him of something about those kinds of conversations, it's a lot more difficult to get through to him.
It's interesting. So when you focus on, I guess, the like helping someone, with their rhetoric or with their arguments, do you focus much more on the logic and the formulation of those arguments, or are you focusing more on, the, what's the word I'm looking for, but like the way it's coming off, like the optics, or like their, just their tactics?
Yeah, I think when I started out, I was much more in the boat of like, let's purely do it through rhetoric because it's a lot easier to avoid fights that way. So people are less apt to fight you when your argument isn't that, hey, what you're saying is wrong or it's illogical or it doesn't make sense. Instead,
Mm,
saying like, people don't understand this because they can see that. They know that. Like, yes, I know that people don't understand this. I know that I'm having a problem with this. That's like, you're pointing to like an observable fact. And I think remedying that and having a conversation centered around that is a lot easier to have. Lately, I've been trying to dip more into the logical side of things because there are obviously problems there too. And I think those are honestly easier to solve, because they're just nuts and bolts. You can like swap them out, and that seems to be the way that everybody's used to thinking about debates. Is like, what is the best argument? What is the best source? How do I counter this? Rather than how am I coming off? How am I communicating to this person? How am I connecting with their audience? And given that so many of the top people, like Vosh and Steven and some of the other debate people, believe that when you're bringing on an ideology that you completely disagree with, you want to dismantle it in real time. You want to make them look like an idiot. That's how
mm.
you're converting that audience over to yours. You're convincing people out of that like pothole of like ideology. And since that's the case, everybody's very focused on like war tactics and like how to make them look dumb. And so I've had to move more in that direction as of late, just because the rhetoric thing hasn't been making a ton of progress.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's been really frustrating for me, and it's probably one of the reasons why I've kind of stepped away from like the debate world in Twitch, because it's so much. I came from the debate world in Discord, which is very much. It's like a very different environment because it's not as audience focused. But in Twitch, it's very focused on humiliation, on like that kind of like optics at like aspect of it. So it makes sense that has been that been kind of frustrating for you? Like, do you not like that kind of debate style?
Um, I don't personally like it, but it's just because I think people become divorced from like the ideas, the people, and their purpose of being in the conversation. It would make sense to Vosh or Steven, who make thousands of dollars or whatever every single day, to treat the conversations this way because they're getting a lot of benefit out of them,
Hmm.
regardless of how they go. Um, and their audience likes that, right? And the audience is what pays their bills. But for people that are small, I I don't think they've thought through like the reasons why other people are behaving this way and how they're you know how they should be behaving or trying to like deduce why other people are behaving this way. So when other people decide to be like debate bro or ruin conversations and they have no audience, they're not looking to convert people to an ideology. They're literally just in there to like stir up the pot or like cause problems, maybe sometimes in the hope of getting famous on Twitch. It's like, well, that's frustrating to me. Those kinds of people are far more frustrating than people who want to like dismantle ideologies or get people to their audience. Like I think at the smaller scale, it bothers me a lot more because I'm not sure if I'm explaining this super well, but yeah,
No, you
like
are.
yeah, that's when it really bothers me because it's like there's no reason for this. Like you're just being disruptive to no end.
I think it's just like the classic thing where people see something works for someone like Vosh or Destiny, and they think that it's going to work for them. Um, but
Mm.
I feel like I grew much more quickly on Twitch than I expected, and so there's probably like a multitude of reasons that contributed to that. It's probably my fancy VTuber that did the most of the work. But I think for me, like I was very focused on trying to do something different because I've always like believed that you can't just like get into something thinking that you are just going to do it a little bit better. You've got to bring something like new to a community. Otherwise, why would someone have to watch you if they could just watch someone else who's done it before? So, and I don't know. There's just so many people that just do they just try the same thing over and over again. It's very strange to me. Um, So, and that's something that you've done, is that like your whole thing is, tons of people do like kind of React Andy stuff, but you're the only person I know that like you've turned that into something very unique where it's very hyper focused on like rational criticism of, people's rhetoric and all of that stuff. But does it often like create like a wall between you and other creators? Like because you're always giving them that kind of criticism. I can imagine it can hurt sometimes.
It definitely does. And I think especially when I have to mix in being entertaining alongside the review. So when I first started out, I was very much of the opinion that there's no reason that you should have a bunch of enemies on this platform. It is very easy when you're deciding when to turn that camera on and when you know it's on to be responsible when you're in front of it and to not be picking fights with a bunch of people if that's not your intention. And so I did that at first. Then I saw how A4 Andre and other people were treated by people that were meant to be their friends in the platform, and that sometimes, part of the barrier to friendship or part of the requirement of it is that you are not friends with other particular people. So if your goal is to be friends with everybody, it's not possible, because to be friends with some people, you necessarily have to like not be friends with others. So after that point, I started being a little more cruel and a little bit more funny, like for the audience in my reviews. And I think that has led me into the most problems with like other creators, because they'll see a joke about them or they'll see my tone and the humor in the review. And that's a very easy thing to latch onto to disregard it. It's a very easy thing to latch onto to disregard me, even if it's kind of divorced from the reality of the review, right? Even if it's like, yeah, I made a joke about you, but the reason I'm confident in making the joke is because we're pausing every 5 seconds, and I have like a whole, note-taking document in front of me about like everything that you said during the entire debate. So like, everything is within the confines of my understanding of you, either in this debate or in past ones that I've done reviews, and yeah, so I guess it has strained my relationships with other creators, but just kind of more lately than it was at the beginning. I think people were more appreciative at the beginning. But then I get soured on people, because if I gave you a bunch of advice and you took none of it, and you behave the same way, and then I try to give a callback to that, like, hey, you're doing that thing, remember that I talked to you about? And you pretend the conversation didn't happen. Like, stuff like that really got me to dislike other people more. And so it's not like it's a one-sided thing. Like I think I've definitely been upset at other creators, and that's probably half of it as well.
Has being like a streamer, going from being a viewer to a streamer, because I'm guessing you were a fan of a lot of people's like work, or like just listening to these debates, you just were interested in it. Was it super weird like going, oh, no.
No.
Well, was it super weird going from like watching people at all, to actually getting to talk to them and seeing what their personalities are like behind closed doors? Like, was that kind of depressing?
Most people are very similar to the way they're on stream, and when they're not, it tends to be very obvious. So I've learned more so how to pick up on the smell of somebody being different on stream than they are in real life, or when somebody is just like them, but like to the nth degree, right? Like I think Steven is somebody who's like just the same as he is in private, but like to the nth degree on stream. There's like a human aspect of it. No, that's not to say he's more extreme on stream. I would say he's more extreme like in private, it sounds like. But he's more entertaining on stream. So he's just more of himself. But then there are people like Synth. Like Synth tries to be a debate bro and stuff, but meeting Synth behind closed doors, like I think Synth is an adorable little, human being, and very cute, and not at all like the big barking dog that she wants to be. So, um I think for the most part, I haven't been disappointed, but I was only fans of like Steven and a few other streamers, and none of them were really debate people. I wasn't particularly fond of Vosh because of the criticism and naughty things that he did. I wasn't super big fans of any of the other debate bro people because they tend to just be like obstructions in the conversation. So yeah, I think the only thing that was really sad about a creator that I liked was learning that Steven doesn't really. I thought if somebody brings this guy specifically worded criticism that is like perfectly tailored to like be digestible to him, that would be what he needs, because he always says that he's willing to like accept this criticism and improve and move on and so on and so forth. So it was really sad for me to see that like it's not really like that with him. He's not super great at taking criticism, and the only reason that he wants criticism really is so that he can fight against that criticism and disprove it. So when he's incapable of disproving it or making arguments against it, either he shuts down and ends the conversation, or he like throws a tantrum. It's typically one or the other. And that's sad. That's like something that's made me sad about a creator that I liked. But that's been about it.
You know, I think like we all like to think that we're really good at taking criticism. But I feel like there's things that we know about ourselves that we're willing to take. So if like someone, I don't know, if you were giving me criticism and you're like, hey, you say like a lot, you know, or a lot, and you need to really improve that, or you're saying you know all the time, I would be like, yeah, that makes sense. I totally know that. I wouldn't take that to heart, right? But if like the criticism was something like a really deep-seated insecurity, I could totally imagine people like lashing out, right? Or getting really defensive or something like this, because in order to just like do this job and put yourself in front of all these thousands of people like that can potentially watch you, you have to kind of be a little divorced from reality about like your abilities to make mistakes. You have to have like be someone in like this kind of like netherworld of, of having a false image of yourself, right? That's something that I've started to try to learn, because I have a tendency to absorb way too much criticism. Like I have this trend that I do, which is really, really, it's an unhealthy thing, but I do it still every night, where I like Google my name. I search my name on like every Discord. I search my name on every person's streamer's chat and everything. And I just want to see what every single person has said. Just so I could see if there's like a common thing that I could start working on or something like that. But I can definitely like absorb that too much. And I've been told by every single creator, you cannot do this. Like it will drive you insane. So yeah, like what about getting criticism yourself? Like, how do you think that you take criticism?
So first I'll say like, I'm not sure if the advice is to not look at that stuff, because other creators I've talked to behind the scenes do admit to things like looking themselves up on like Discord communities that are adjacent to theirs. Because I recently came out with that, and then people were like, I can't believe he admitted to that. And then a bunch of other streamers are like, just by the way, like we all do that, or we all hang out in other people's chats, or we're all like looking up on the Reddit what our username is, you know? So like, I think that's pretty normal. And I thought it would be normal because when you're a YouTuber, there's an entire workflow that you can put into place to do that automatically. There's Google Alerts you can set up for your name or for keywords associated with your channel. So I thought that would be a normal thing that you could just transfer over to Twitch. And evidently it is, but the viewers think about it way differently than the streamers seem to. But beyond that, I think there's, you have to be able to like triage criticism and triage the people that are like giving you criticism. So like when I go on the Destiny Discord and I look up my name, if somebody's like, this Booksmarts guy is a complete cuck and he's ruining this stream and blah, blah, blah. And I scroll up from their like how they talk in the chat and everything that they say is just mean and rude and hurtful all the time, then it's like, okay, well, what are you pointing towards here? Is it anything helpful? Oh, I'm a cuck? Like, well, that doesn't do any good for me. So, okay. That's not helpful to me, you know?
Yeah.
Or sometimes people are just off base at the things that they say like all the time. Like sometimes people are making criticisms and I find that they have made criticisms of other creators that are just like completely unfounded, or they're, making criticisms about a YouTube video that somebody posted and they didn't fucking watch it. These are little things that I look for to kind of invalidate this like anonymous criticism, or to kind of figure out how I should be interpreting this. But when criticism comes from other creators in private, I tend to take it really, really seriously. Like I just filled this notebook, and this notebook has like nothing but notes from like all the phone calls that I do with other creators, or any of the Discord calls. So like I keep really good track of what people are saying, and if there's a pattern, it's clear that that's a problem whether I want to admit it or not. And I think that holds me really accountable.
That's so smart that you have a notebook like that. Like I'm totally going to steal that idea. It's actually brilliant. Has there ever been like a moment where someone gave you some criticism that did kind of hit you hard and made you kind of look inward a little?
Yeah, there's been quite a few times. I think one that is public and that most people would be aware of is when Steven said I was naive at the end of one of our conversations. He asked what age I was, he asked how long I had been engaged in the platform, and then he said I was naive. And that sent me for a loop of like thinking about, okay, I'm not taking the creator perspective seriously enough here. I'm speaking in a way where I think that the audience wouldn't disagree with me because these are techniques and advice that would work in real life, and it's difficult to argue against them. But on this platform, it's different. So, like, that would be an example of something that really got me thinking and was helpful. And there's plenty of other ones, like wasting too much time focusing on negative comments during the reviews, having the videos at even 1.5x because people that watch back the VOD at 2x are overwhelmed.
Mm.
Um, you know, just there's tons and tons of it. Like I said, this notebook is full of like things I put a to do check mark next to, and then like I've changed about the stream or I've changed about my coverage of events. I also have like an entire Notion document, like a note taking document of checks that I need to do or things I need to think about before I start a review. So, for instance, making sure I make clear that we are benefiting from hindsight. This is like shower thoughts. We're thinking about the best thing that you could have said in that argument with
Mm.
that person. And that's like a privileged position to have. We have hindsight. I know what's going to happen. I've seen the video before. Making clear how far I watched is important. Differentiating me from the React streamers, like you mentioned at the beginning, is important because people don't understand that either. So yeah, they just tend to add up over time, and the content has changed as a result.
So like can you tell me, let's go back to, your origin story, right? Because I kind of want to find out how you got to that place of being someone that A, felt confident enough to be able to start streaming and doing this, right? And B, right, even felt like knowledgeable, right? Like to get to a point, because I've heard your criticisms and they're really, really well done. So, and it's definitely, when I found out your age, I was kind of shocked. I was like really shocked. I'm like, I'm a fucking graduate student, and I really feel like your rhetoric is a billion times better than mine. So, yeah. So like, let's go back to Booksmarts' original origin story. Like, tell me a little bit about your upbringing. And if you're ever like uncomfortable with saying something, just like let me know. Right? We can always just move on to another question.
Yeah. And I'll try to keep the backstory related to like what I do now, because I feel like
Sure.
what you're looking for is like what has led to like this dude. If we go back to when I was a child,
Yeah, baby Booksmarts.
yeah. My parents got divorced when I was maybe like 5 or 6. And they just really just did not get along with each other. They would fight about stuff. We would be like the couriers back and forth. And there had to be almost like a public and private position. There had to be a mom position and a dad position. And then there was like the kid position. So how do we talk about things that are going on in the house? How do we talk about it to mom? And how do we talk about it to dad? And so as I got older, I took more of like a mediating role between the two of them. Like, no, you're being completely unreasonable. Like, don't text her that because you're gonna piss her off. Or like with my mom, like, don't say shit like that. Like, just be reasonable. You need to like do X and Y and Z, like coaching them through and engaging with each other, so that we have a more like harmonious household. So it may have started there. When I was about, I think 16 or 17, I started writing papers for people. Those started as high school papers, and I've always been a tutor since I was maybe in middle school, so maybe 11, 12. I don't know. I've used the internet for a long time, so I would post on Craigslist that like if you needed help, like somebody who is that same age, then I could do that. And for some fucking reason, parents paid for that. So we would meet at like a McDonald's or a Starbucks, and I would tutor. And I
How
think
did you become such a good writer?
I had really good teachers and professors. So I don't feel like students use those resources as much as they could. I know very few students that do,
I
and the
agree.
ones that do like don't need it because they get past that in like a year or two. They improve their writing. Um, Yeah, so I when I was doing college papers for people, they weren't all A's at first. They got a lot of like marks back, and I made sure that every time there was a critical paper, I refunded it. I said, if you email the professor and you get notes on this essay, I will refund it. So as long as you get me comments and feedback from the professor on this paper that didn't do well, I'll refund you all the money. And then I would use those comments as
Wow.
like a really valuable, way of improving. And I started to learn that professors are really brilliant people. Regardless of what you think about them, they're very brilliant in their particular thing. They've had to learn a lot about it, and it gives them unique insight, and I respect that a lot. So I just at some point accepted the feedback and the criticism and just paid for it and got a lot better at writing. And I think that carried on all the way until like doing streaming now. A lot of the pitfalls and stuff that I learned even through like private communication, because when you're helping the grad students with their master's program or their doctoral, they're communicating with their professors, with their board, with other people like advisors, and oftentimes I would be privy to those communications and giving advice there. And so that also helped with like learning to better communicate with people and learning what makes intelligent people tick and like where do you need to like tiptoe around and where do you not. So I think that's like a TLDR of all that.
That's really interesting. Like, I know that. So I'm in history, and writing in history, like maybe this is just us grandizing like ourselves. But writing in history, we tend to think that like writing in history is very different than writing in the other fields, particularly sociology or political science or philosophy. Have you noticed that, like that different, that there are like these huge gaps between these various academic faculties in terms of like how you're supposed to write, how you're supposed to argue?
Yeah, there are gaps. Sometimes they're huge. Oftentimes they're not. Like when you're talking about these fields like sociology, history, political science, like I would kind of group all these together as like one sort of way of talking. Although philosophy has like mathematical philosophy or whatever, where
Mhm.
like it's equations and it's very difficult to read. Um, they all have their different ways. And I think that as you get to the higher and higher levels of that field, of that profession, where you start reading like, oh, people know who this author is. Like this is an important author
Mhm.
in political science, or this is an important philosopher, or this is an important so and so. Those people have very particular ways of writing, and they're allowed like much more flexibility in the way that they're writing things than a student would or than a professor would. And so I think those are the people that can often like change the way that the entire voice of the field is sounding. And I think that those are the people guiding a lot of that change. But for the most part, at like the lower level, like academia, like when you're doing your master's or doing your bachelor's or anything like that, I think it's most of those ones that you just talked about sound similar to me because they have similar requirements in terms of how they're written. But there's definite differences between how everything is handled. Like I learned recently, and it got me in a lot of trouble, that like climate science and the papers around that are like very difficult to read if you're somebody that's coming from psych, which is my background. Because
Mhm.
in psych, we have to like go back and give a history of like where explanations and tests and things like that are coming from in a way that climate science papers just simply do not. Or if you're in business and you're writing about like banking procedures or managerial things, like you're kind of explaining how you got to that point, or you're explaining where these methodologies are coming from, or you're explaining the math behind things in a way that you don't, again, with climate science. Like you just take shots in the dark on certain numbers and those things just are never explained to you. So different fields are written differently for sure in that regard, but like stylistically they all sound kind of similar. I don't know.
It's interesting. There's a lot of debate within historiography and within like the history fields on the best way to write history. Because at the end of the day, like, historians, their job is to catalog and to record history, but also to teach it, right? And often those two things can be very counter to one another, right? Um, and there's this new movement within, historically history was supposed to always be written in this very like scientific, matter of fact, dry way, and now there's this kind of movement to write it in more like narrative fashion. Have you ever had to write papers or helped people with papers in like a more narrative kind of form?
Papers in the narrative form. I can't say that I have actually. I don't think I have.
Yeah, God help you if you do ever do, because it's really really challenging. Um, okay, so going back to your childhood, so your parents, did they ever graduate from university? Were they like particularly academic people?
My dad went to art school, and I'm pretty sure he finished art school. My mom didn't. I think she went to training to become a police officer, but in the last like month or two of it, she got pregnant with me, so she gave up on that.
Okay, so your mom was kind of like a stay-at-home mom.
Sort of at the very beginning, but she's always worked in restaurants, and she's really, really, really good at hospitality. Like people fall in love with her every restaurant that she works at.
Hmm.
Um, like I used to work as a host at a restaurant that she worked at, and when people figured out, because we had different last names, and people figured out that she was my mom, it changed the way that I was treated there for sure. So I
Oh,
think
that's
she's a
interesting
rock
because she was so
star.
popular.
Yeah,
Do you think she's probably
yeah.
one of the reasons why you feel comfortable streaming and stuff, because she's such like a entertainer type person?
Maybe. I definitely got it from her more than I did my dad, I think. Yeah.
Your dad's like more quiet. I'm imagining right now like a hipster kind of artist in my head.
No, he's just like a quiet dork. He's into like military stuff and Star Wars. He's just like a nerd. Like if you picture his house, the living room has the three trilogy posters from Star Wars framed, and he decorates the house with items that he's found at yard sales and garage sales and things that look like they could be haunted. He'll age them naturally in the garage, like he'll let dust settle on them, and then he'll like bag them up so that the dust won't be messed up, and he'll start cycling those artifacts of sorts through the house. So like he's an interesting dude. He's like a quiet weirdo, I would say.
Are you close with your parents?
um Closer with my dad nowadays, but into adulthood I kind of got farther apart from them just because, you know, so much of my young life was dedicated to working around these people that when I had the opportunity to like be independent and to not have to like kind of be limited by, you know, be limited by them and like their hangups and their personal problems, I kind of I took that opportunity. So lately I haven't had a very good relationship with them, but when I was younger, yeah.
So you haven't. When did you move out? Because I'm guessing you don't live with them anymore, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was independent from the moment I turned 18. My mom kicked
Oh
me
wow,
out, and then I had to pay rent with my dad. And then I moved to Asia. So
you moved
things
to
happened like
Asia.
pretty quick. Yeah.
You've got to tell me about that. Why didn't you move to Asia? Like
Um,
where in Asia?
I moved to Thailand, and
Oh okay.
it was because I wanted to see like Korea, I wanted to see Japan, I wanted to see Hong Kong. I had places I wanted to visit. And my dad told me that you don't have any responsibilities right now. You're not accountable to people. And so now is the time when you could do things like that. And if you have inkling or desire in your heart to make those things happen, you should do them now, because when you have those responsibilities, it's going to gnaw at you on the inside that you're not ever going to be able to do those things because of the decisions that you've made. So keep that in mind and get those things out of the way now before you have those things, before you fall in love, before you have
Hmm.
kids, before, any of that stuff. And so I took that pretty seriously. Thailand was cheap. I could afford the rent with the money I was making doing essay writing. I saved up some, and I used that to travel around. So I got to see all those countries out there, and that was pretty fun.
Can I ask like how much money were you making with essays? Because like I've known a lot of people who've tried that before, and it's not the most lucrative thing.
Yeah, you have to be very industrious, or I know there's a better word. I can't think of it, but you need to be a good business person because it's something that scales. So um, you can make pretty decent money as long as you're a responsible person that can keep track of due dates on your own. But if you have even one other person working with you, you have two other people working with you, you can greatly increase like the volume of work that you're able to take in. So I made like okay money on my own, but when I started working with other people and I had work that I could toss off to editors and I had other
Hmm.
writer people, that's when things got a lot better. I had somebody that was able to do math in science work, right? I'm not able to do hard sciences. I'm not able to do mathematics. I'm not good at that. But once I had somebody that could fill that gap, all of a sudden, like an entire world of papers becomes
This
available to
sounds
us,
kind of
right?
like a company, like you were operating
Essentially,
a
yeah.
little company. So, and
Yeah.
then you would get like a cut of, would you get like a cut of the work of the payment that you would pass off to other people?
Yeah. Everybody gets paid hourly. So everybody has like a really good hourly rate. And I just asked them to keep track of their hours. So everybody got paid hourly. And then if I was able to make a profit by like managing on the back end, like a way to have that done quicker, then I would just pocket the difference. And that's generally how it worked.
That's cool. That's actually like very, very innovative. And it makes sense now because you were basically starting like this entire company. Are you, you know, are you a capitalist?
Yeah. And that was a big bit of advice I got behind the scenes early on. I was very hesitant about like accepting help from the community. I didn't have a lot of money. I was like homeless when I started
Hmm.
streaming. And so I had people reaching out that were like willing to help with stuff on the channel, and I just rejected all of it. I rejected music offers, I rejected editor offers, I rejected thumbnail people. I just kept rejecting them because I saw the way that creators are treated when they took that opportunity, when they
Hmm.
took advantage of these people by accepting that help. And it wasn't until Wicked Supreme mentioned to me that like, but you're a capitalist, dog. You're not, your whole brand is not that you're some socialist,
Hmm.
angel come to earth who's trying to like liberate everybody. Like the problem is that those people don't accept like this capitalistic side of things. So to see them do that is like, there's a gross mismatch between like their public facing personality and the way that they're running their business behind the scenes, the way that they're making their own personal choices despite their ideology.
Hmm.
Um, and that really helped me to like accept more help from people, and get mods that are helping me out and get people that are doing the thumbnails and get people that are helping me edit, and I send the money when I can, but obviously like this doesn't make a ton of money.
Hmm.
um
I.e.,
but
everyone donate to Booksmarts. Send lots of money. You're streaming right now, right?
I am not.
Oh, okay. Well, I was to say it's too bad you're not streaming because then I would pressure everyone to give you a hype train.
You're good.
But yeah, I totally agree with you. It's very frustrating when people don't like live by their ideals. There's, I guess, the argument that most socialists would give is that we're not living in socialism right now or any kind of like socialist environment, so that's, they disagree with the game, but if the game is there, they're gonna still play it. So what would be your response to that?
That it's not black or white. That there are a range of decisions that you could make. And this is something that like I realized about the way I chose to run my essay business, if you want to call it that, was I made sure everybody got paid really well. And if
Hmm.
anybody ever got into financial problems, I would loan them money, like a lot of money. Um, and I thought that that was a way that I can balance this. That's not a way a normal like employer is going to operate for everybody, but it's a way that I wanted to operate. I want everybody to get paid good. I want everybody to be able to like brag about how much they're making. I want college kids that are in school only. I only hired college kids. I only hired people that were in school. And I made clear with them that they needed that money for something, that they needed to pay for stuff, that they didn't have a scholarship, that they were unable to get grants. And so I think that there are decisions that you can make that are more ethical than the default decision. And I think you just need to look for the most ethical decisions that you can make, the decisions that are in line with your ideology and what you want to see in the world. And I think that's the advice there. Like, it doesn't mean that you pay them everything and you make no profit. That's like a black and white way of thinking about things. But like there are ways of taking care of your workers to your own detriment, and you can start to head in that direction without going like full blown communist or whatever. And what disappoints me is the lack of creativity in these people for like looking for those options or looking for those opportunities to be different and to be better in their own eyes. And I think that that's the advice to those people, is to look for you know you know, there's other options that you can pick there. There's other things you can do. It's not black and white like that.
Yeah, I actually totally agree with you. There's a moment that I heard about that happened. I don't know if it happened to you in Thailand, but I heard that you got mugged.
Yeah.
And like I got mugged once, and it was like a very traumatic experience. And I feel like such a privileged person saying that was like a traumatic experience for me. But like, what can you tell me about what happened to you? Like,
Yeah. So basically, I didn't have the fear of God stricken in me yet, so I wasn't really afraid, just like walking around alleys and stuff.
mm-hmm.
And I wanted to explore like all around where my apartment was in Thailand. And part of that was like going down these alleyways and stuff. And it looked like there was a bunch of ramen and like cool shit to eat down this alleyway. And I start walking down it, but nobody's out. Like not a single person. The stores say that
like
they're
ramen
open.
on the ground, or like a ramen like restaurant.
Like a restaurant of sorts.
Okay.
Yeah, but there was nobody around. And then there were these people coming up on me. And by the time I like had thought about how weird the situation was, they like one of the dudes pulled a knife on me. And all I remember is I swung at the hand that had the knife and I like flipped out. I remember I was flailing about. I bet I yelled some shit. And then fucking the next thing I realized, these two dudes bounced. They're gone because I acted like a fucking crazy person. I didn't even have much money in my pockets. And I looked at my hand and I had like a big gash in it, and I like,
oh my God,
I went like
that's
this,
a scar from it.
and I like pulled the skin and I went, oh, I can see the inside machinations of my hand. That's not good. And then I went to the hospital and stuff. But that's the long and short of it. People just tried to rob me while I was trying to go get food.
Everyone's laughing at me because I asked if the ramen was on the ground, but like I wasn't sure if it was like an alleyway and you just saw like some packet of ramen or something. But yeah, everyone's making fun
I didn't know what you meant by that. I was like, on the ground. I don't know where Eris is from, but I don't know what that means.
I don't know. Like if I saw like a packet of ramen on the ground, like I would be like, okay, like let's see if this is open or not. But whatever. Anyways, my unhealthy habits aside, so you got mugged, and then you got that gash in your hand. So you literally opened up the gash when the like moment happened and looked inside your hand?
Yeah. Well, it's not the first time I've had like a cut, and generally that
doesn't look like a cut though. That looks like more than a cut.
Yeah. I mean, it looks gnarly because yeah. I guess it was a little bit more than a cut, but because it depends on how it bleeds. So if you open this cut and it squirted, I knew I need to go to the hospital really soon because I've busted something in there. Or if I open it and it's literally coming out like a water fountain, then I've hurt something and I really need to go to the hospital. So the first thing I'm looking to see is, do I need stitches and do I need to go to the hospital? And I've had like cuts all over my hand and like different parts of me before where that's the case. It's like, let's move around the skin, see if I've like cut an artery or something crazy. And if I haven't, then do I need stitches? If I don't, then not that big of a deal. So that's the reason why I messed around with it, was to see if I, heard anything that was like mission critical.
So like you stopped them. Did they end up actually taking your stuff?
What about my stuff?
Did they end up taking your stuff?
Did they end up taking my stuff? I don't think they did, but I did throw a bunch of shit on the floor. So I don't know. Like, that's the thing, is like, I don't remember super well what happened. I remember swinging at the knife and I remember flailing. I remember yelling. I may have taken stuff out of my pockets and thrown it, like pocket change or something. Because when I got to the hospital and I was like kind of getting my bearings and like, okay, so that happened. Like, I'm starting to like process it a bit more. I noticed that like one of my pockets is completely emptied out. So I don't know. I guess I grabbed like a handful of shit out of my pocket and threw it. But
there's probably so much adrenaline like in you that's probably why you don't. It's weird. I always assumed that when I got mugged, I could like talk my way out of it because I'm really good at convincing people for things. So I thought like, oh, like I could just talk my way out of it. And I didn't take into consideration what happens when someone does something that bridges like an intense social norm, like or like crosses it, like, like mugging you, right? You know that feeling when you know that someone's about to do something kind of really shitty, like your heart starts beating faster and you start kind of going to like this survival mode, and you're not like I was not thinking at all like, rationally or anything. It was just like, oh my God, I'll do anything, I'll do anything, I'll do anything, just don't hurt me. Like that was my initial reaction. So was that, I guess, your flailing arms? Maybe that was your version of that.
Yeah. I mean, I was upset that they were threatening me. Like, because the only thing I remember being like going through my head is I don't even have a lot of money. You're not even going to get anything off of me. I had like, I don't know, how much did I have? Maybe like 350 baht. And that's like not a lot at all. I think that's maybe like $10 or less. So, I mean, I didn't even have a ton of money. The only thing I remember is just being upset
have a phone
at
on
the
you or
audacity.
anything?
I did, but it doesn't really work all that well
Okay.
in Thailand. I don't think I had like my SIM cards and all that set up necessarily. Plus, my house is like really, really close. So I just walked back to the house and said, "Ah!"
Were
and they
you
took me to the
scared?
hospital.
Are you scared to go outside afterwards? Like,
yes, yeah. I didn't go outside for a while because I was really sick afterwards. The problem is I was on like I think it was on my 6th or 7th day of a fast when I got attacked. So I needed to very quickly eat again without making myself sick, and I didn't do that properly.
oh no.
And so I got really sick. But yeah, so I didn't think too much about going outside because I was kind of stuck inside for a while. But yeah, afterwards I was a lot more careful. I was a lot more aware of where are people right now, and if there are not people around me, this is like a dangerous situation. So looking more for like, am I in a group was something I paid a lot more attention to afterwards. And where would I run if I need to run right now is another thing that I think about a lot more.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Even to this day, like how long ago was this?
Ooh, when Trump was elected, maybe 5 years ago.
Oh, so it's not even that long ago. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's still gonna like I'm imagine that still affects you. Like even now that you're not in Thailand anymore.
I want to say not really. Like it probably does in terms of like being aware of stuff, but I don't really think about being mugged or muggings like very often anymore.
Did you have any like so you had a lot of anger towards the people that mugged you, right? Um
Initially, yeah. It
But
was
you
more
did-
so the audacity. You're not gonna get anything out of me. I don't have shit on me.
so do you not like people who mug other people? Do you think that's unethical?
I'm not like debate people hate this about me, but I don't think in those terms. Like it really I would need to know like what's going on with the person, what's going on with the person that got mugged. Like if you're rich as fuck and you had some pocket change, you had like $100 in your pocket, and that pays for like the remainder of this person's rent and their food and all this other shit, and they want to take a gamble against the state of like fucking with you, then like I guess that's a gamble they can take, and I'm not one to like shit on them for deciding to take it, you know? If they're not really hurting that person, it's tough for me to like condemn their actions, you know, that's up to the state. Because I look at life as like a video game that we've all spawned into. The rules are kind of already set up. We're told that there's histories to like why the rules are set up the way that they are. But in any case, like I try to separate out like the human beings, the players, and like the rules of the game. And money seems to be like an entire like subsystem of this game that really fucks over a lot of people. And that's where like I agree with the socialist a little bit, is like the money thing really fucks with people, and it creates artificial situations where like people are surrounded by wealth and food and water and shelter and all these other things, but because they have not reached like the number of points necessary, they're not allowed to have access to these things even if we have a surplus of them. And so like that's something that's bothered me since I was little, and that's why I'm not too harsh on those kinds of folks or people that do that stuff. Like my grandpa was a homeless dude that you know, died while he was homeless. He slipped down a staircase at the beach, and he died from that because something about the hospital didn't want to treat him and this stuff because he was homeless. So he died. And so my dad has always raised me to be very perceptive to like the economic differences of people and how that impacts the way that they choose to engage, you know? Like it's not that these like to understand things like racism and prejudice and like all these other things, like it's helpful to remember like where people come from and how they're raised and all this other stuff. So I don't know, I'm more sensitive and understanding of like even the worst parts of people, and that's probably thanks in large part to my dad.
Yeah, that's actually the fact that you could be like humble afterwards and recognize that. I admire you for it, because like I feel like one of my worst qualities is I can get really, I don't know if vindictive is the right word, but when someone does something that I deem as like unethical or wrong, like taking someone's iPod, for example. I remember finding out that someone I knew took someone's iPod, like they stole someone's iPod when we were like in high school, and I never could be friends with them again. Just taking someone's iPod is something simple as that, but it bothered me because all I could think about was like, how do we know that that person hadn't like saved up all of their money for their like, you know, their whole life, you know, and they'd finally gotten the iPod, and how special the iPod was, because I didn't grow up in wealth or anything, so I knew like how special some things can be when you really save up for them. And then someone just goes and like takes it without any kind of care, and like that really bothered me, that someone could just like, you know, value their own needs over someone else's needs just automatically. But you're right, like, you know, society, I'm a determinist, so I do think that society kind of creates people and all of that stuff. So it's like definitely this disconnect that I have, like logically in me. Super weird. I don't know how to explain it. Do you have any kind of disconnects kind of like that?
Um, I have a lot of them around like logical topics. Like there are topics that I understand what the good arguments are for them, and I understand like philosophically how we're meant to think about them or ethically how we're meant to think about them, but it's not the system that I use to actually live my life. And I suspect that this is the case for many other people. And that's I guess like a huge disconnect is like philosophically to win this argument, this is the position that is the most correctest. But if you like Thanos snap me or like Freaky Friday me into the body of a person going through this like hypothetical problem, I'm not sure that I answer this hypothetical in that way. I'm not sure that that's the way I behave, even if it's the most optimal. And the mugging is like a good example of that. Like I didn't have control over what I was going to do. There's no way I could go back and redo it in a different way. I don't think. Like it was all just a blur. It was like heart pounding, a bunch of shit
Fight or
going
flight
on.
moment.
Yeah. And so
Yeah,
like
that just totally makes sense.
yeah, it's like that for a lot of philosophy and like argumentative stuff. Like I know what I think is the correct answer, but it may be divorced from the reality of like the way it would play out.
Yeah, that honestly makes a lot of sense. I think in general, as humans, we tend to think, especially people who try to be smarter, you know, than your average person, or like they like to think of themselves as that. The people are just way more less rational than they think. We're still animals, and we've got like those urges, and it's moments like that that really remind you that yeah, that like our brains are made up of all these chemicals and stuff, and we have less control over them than we really think.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you weren't really like a fan of Vosh. Could you talk a little bit about like the reasons for that?
Yeah. So I have like red flags in people. And like if Vosh or any of his people watch this, just know I try to put this at the back of my head whenever I do reviews and stuff. It likely does bias me, and that's for sure going to be the case. I do my best to avoid that, but like I'm confident that I'm doing the best I can to avoid that. I meditate before I do my reviews. I read all those notes, like I've talked to you about.
You
I have the Notion
meditate.
document.
I didn't know you meditated before. That's cool.
Yeah. Generally I do. And I'm trying to look for anything that's popping up that might get in the way of the review and try and like, okay, like I'm having this feeling about this person. I need to like keep that in check during the talk. So I'll write that down like, hey, I wasn't able to get rid of this during the meditation. So like look out for this. Don't make fun of this. Don't comment on this. Ignore this, you know, like move past it because you're not handling it super well. With Vosh, like I have red flags with people when people lie or how people behave when they're put on the spot. These are like two important things. I've seen Vosh lie, and he says it's misremembering. He like you know misremember stuff an awful lot, which could be the case. But some of these things are lies. Some of these things they have a level of intentionality to them that I don't think it's fair to just characterize them as misremembering. And then when he handled that sexual, whatever you want to call it,
Sexual
accusations,
harassment, yeah.
the way that he handled that, I feel like was, it's almost like, have you seen the movie The Thing?
No.
So basically, the premise of this movie is that there's these aliens that come down to the Arctic, and they're shapeshifters, and they can look like people. But the alien has a self-defense mechanism. If you split apart any little piece of it, that little piece will try its damnedest to survive. So what they do to test and see who is the alien is they take blood from everybody and they put in a little petri dish, and they put fire onto the petri dish. And they go one by one, and each of the people's blood just like bubbles in the petri dish. And then they get to the thing, and the blood jumps out of the petri dish and screams and runs across the room. And I feel like some people get like that when they're put under a lot of pressure. They turn into the thing. They'll do whatever they can to scramble and get out of this situation. And when people like make a habit out of that, that's how they handle situations. They put on a facade of like, I'm okay, but behind that facade, I'm really trying to figure out how the fuck do I get out of this thing. When somebody's put on the spot and that's the way that they respond to criticism, or that's the way they respond to accusations like that, I find it notable of their character, and I try to keep that in mind moving forward with that person. You were given a very specific test and you failed it for me, and that's like a very damning thing in my eyes. And that may be like overstepping, like maybe I shouldn't do that, but that's just personally how I try to think about people, because I've been burned by a lot of people for like whom I should have been well aware that there are going to be problems with them. And like the kinds of people that lie are the kinds of people that are very like self-interested, and they're willing to behave that way and lie and do these things are people that I generally want to avoid, because they're scary people to be around. I never have faith or confidence that they're looking out for the interests of the truth, the interests of whatever they're talking about, or the interests of other people. They're looking out for the interests of themselves first and foremost above anything else. And that's a scary kind of person. And so that was a very bad impression that I got of him, and it was pretty lasting. I find other things to appreciate about him. He's wonderful at rhetoric. He's very attentive to audiences. He's very careful. Like, these are things that I can appreciate about him while still like keeping him like at a yard's distance. Like, well, hold on, but like I've seen the way that you behave, and like you're a kind of person that I cannot like connect with in any like meaningful way, because that's too frightening for me. I can't be around people like that.
Has this been like a trend of you always noticing him acting like this? Or was this just like kind of a first impression of a few moments a while back that has just kind of lasted?
It's something I keep seeing. Like,
okay.
And it's just, it's very hurtful to other people. If somebody says that's not what you said, you had said X and Y and Z, and you said, no, I didn't. I said A, B, and C. Maybe you don't remember. Maybe you're dumb. Maybe you're this. Maybe you're that. Maybe you're bad faith. Maybe you have brain rot. Like, when you're doing these sorts of things to people, that's very upsetting to me. I can't like.
I'm so susceptible to that kind of manipulation. Like, that's the easiest way to manipulate me.
And it's rough because it preys on people that are not going to speak up, right? Like, it's going to prey on the people that are like, well, I'll defer to your judgment on that. I could be wrong. That's what you should do. If you're a person that says that you misremember all the time, that you make these mistakes all the time, maybe you should defer to the judgment of other people. Maybe you shouldn't put other people in that position because you're less trustworthy in that regard, right? Like, when people aren't willing to like, I don't know, behave in that way, it very much so upsets me, because they do prey on people that I think I don't want to see preyed upon.
Yeah, no, I can see what you're saying. I guess like my concern would be, I feel like those criticisms, so many people could fit into those criticisms. It seems like just like a human quality, especially the lying part, where I think a lot of people, I ran, before I started streaming, I ran Calliopean Club for 3 years. So I had to like, manage a bunch of people, expecting the highest form of a community while also everyone is anonymous. Very, very challenging, right? And like to manage those two expectations, and and just on average, I found, especially when I was mediating between like two people having an issue, whether it's a staff member or regular members, is like people have very different versions of the truth, right? They have very different versions, and maybe this is me being naive, right? Like Destiny once called you. But it really seems like when I'm talking to those people that they genuinely believe in their truth. So it seems much more like either they have believed they've completely bought into their own lie, or, right, human beings are just really bad at observing truth, right? And our memories are just terrible. Like they're just covered in narrative. And that's what I lean towards. Like, so instead of, I don't know Vosh too well. Like he's always been really polite to me and everything. But that's what I would kind of suspect is a casualty, is a cause of a lot of these issues, is, people having people just misremembering the past. And it's kind of like subconscious.
So, assuming that this is the case, and he's misremembering stuff, and what he says is true, that he misremembers all the time, I think that the advice and the thing moving forward is to take that into account when you run into these situations. Like with me, I have biases that I look out for all of the fucking time. I have a bunch of like red flags that if we get to a topic where I am arguing with people and we're arguing about a topic that is in this red zone, I try to reevaluate and assume that I am the problem here. And I never see him do that. And the problem is, if you're misremembering all of the time, I expect you to be much more hesitant to make claims as to like, when you get into these sticky situations where they're saying one thing happened, you're saying another thing happened, are you somebody that misremembers all the time? Like, okay, well then let's hear them out. Does it make a huge difference to go with what they're saying over what you're saying? Is there an in-between that we can like, there needs to be more flexibility when that's like a problem you have all the time. So that's what I would say with that, assuming that that's the truth. But to get back to this, I think people honestly believe their lies and whatever. That's the difficult thing about liars and that's why I look for like when it's clear that somebody lied. And that's why I take that as like a very meaningful moment for me. When I know for sure, when you told me some shit, like behind closed doors that was one way, and then I hear you talk about it and you literally say the opposite thing, like that is a big moment for me. That is a huge moment of like, what is the utility here of this lie? Are you just lying like frivolously? Because that's like hugely bad. Like I don't know, for me personally, because that's a bad habit. And it's impossible to separate out the people who like completely are bought into like a deception, like they've deceived themselves into believing their lie, and the people who mean to lie. Because the people that mean to lie oftentimes are going to come off as people that totally believe that's the truth. Of course, I'm going to go 100% that this lie that I just told you is the truth. I devised that lie. I'm going to stick by that lie so it does not appear that I am lying, right? And that's why I think like when I see moments where I know for sure that that person is operating in this way, or I notice that they have a habit of that and I'm able to find evidence for that, that's when I make the call of like, I have to avoid you. Because whether this is you misremembering stuff, or whether this is you actually lying, or whether this is like whatever, like I can't, because I'm going to run into that at some point. You're going to say some shit that's not true. I'm going to know it's not true, and I'm going to feel like a crazy person, right? Because I can't point it out. And I cannot be around people like that. I've had so many people in my life that are like that, and they ruin it every time, dude. And they bring down like all of my energy. They just, these kinds of people wreck me. So like as a personal thing, that's like a personal thing to me that I look out for, is like liars and snaky people. I try to be very, very careful about those kinds of people. But generally, if like it's a random person and they said they remember it one way and another party remembers it a different way, like, I would handle it differently. I would give charitability. It's when I have other information that leads me to believe that like this is one of many lies, because you make a habit out of that like that's when I come down on people, but not like random people who might be misremembering stuff.
Do you find that those types of people that you're describing are more common in the streamer kind of space, the streamer YouTube space?
Yes, but we also get away with lying an awful lot while streaming. So I guess those things go hand in hand. It's almost like kids. Like if you learn that you get away with lying to one of your parents and you're a kid, you're probably going to just go to that all the time. Like I would have friends like that at school who would just like completely deceive their parents, and they made an entire habit out of deceiving their parents. So you learn that that works. It's very easy to fall into the habit of doing that. So there are streamers that do that and they get away with it all the time, and they downplay when they did lie about something and they get away with it, you know? So I think a lot of it goes unpunished, and that's why I just have to keep track of it in my head, you know, to steer clear of them.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. There's one of the issues and one of the things that I've struggled with, because there have been a few lies that I've told on stream, mostly relating to other streamers. So if I'm asked, like for example, if I'm asked if I like another streamer, sometimes I really want to be really careful with like, you know, what I'm going to say, what I'm not going to say, right? Because number one, this is my career, right? And those people are probably my coworkers in some weird kind of way. And on another hand, I also know that I'm speaking on a public platform. So if I have a thought in my head, like say, I have a feeling this person is like a creep, right? Like this person's got like, I'm just thinking of a random criticism. Dory, I'm not talking about you. Okay. This person's like, you know, they've got like, I have a feeling they're a creep. I have like this gut feeling. I've seen some things and I've gotten that impression personally. I'm going to think very carefully before I say it on stream. And so I'm not going to be fully honest about that on stream. It's rare, very rare, unless I think it's like a really big deal or I'm like really, really sure about it, because of the potential consequences of that, right? Especially like, you know, having a platform like this, like what if I'm wrong? And then suddenly, what if no matter how much I tell my community, don't go and harass that person? What if they end up going and harass that person? Or what if that person's a bigger streamer? And then that person's like, you know, entire community comes for me. So that can totally happen. So there are like all these, there's an incentive structure, I think, to be kind of dishonest when it comes to certain aspects, right? And especially for me when it comes to other streamers. Like I had in a moment, and I'll never tell my audience what streamer this was, but there was a streamer that was really, really mean to me behind the scenes, like out of nowhere. And they'd been like cataloging all the mistakes I'd ever made. Your face. It's not you. Why are you always worried? Yeah, I'm not talking about you. Okay, I don't mind when you make jokes at me. I mean, like, this person was genuinely mean, right? Mean, but like to my face, like behind the scenes, and it was someone that I personally admired before, right? And I'm never, yeah, it was really, really shitty. It was pathetic. I cried after. It was like really, it was not nice, and I didn't want to put, you know, it's not. See, like people always want to guess who that streamer is, but I never want to say it, and so I'm being dishonest. And if people do suggest it, I'm still going to say no, because I don't want that. First of all, I don't want something negative to happen to that streamer, because I don't know, for all I know, they had a bad day or something. And on top of that, it just like the idea of having like some kind of like streamer war, like streamer drama, is the worst. It's like conflict stresses the fuck out of me. And I'm already dealing with really controversial shit, dealing with like Israeli-Palestinian conflicts and stuff. So I'm not trying to add more to my plate. So, and it's been advice that I've gotten from some other streamers, like be really careful before you talk negatively about another streamer, because once you put something out on the internet, you don't know where it's gonna go.
Yep.
So yeah, so make me feel better about that. I'm kidding. Okay.
Like, I think that's fine. Like, it's strategic. I think that there are certain things that people do that warrant a community service announcement, right? Like when I do reviews, I think a huge part of the review is to help people feel like they're not crazy. So if you tell me, hey, this person said XYZ happened, then they said I said this and they were under this impression, did I give those impressions during the talk? Like was that granted? Was that, or am I crazy, right? I love answering those, because I think that that's something that like line by line review is uniquely suited to. I also think it's uniquely suited to sussing out people that are lying in real time, that are just simply not telling the truth about stuff very willfully. And I think that Vosh has been very careful ever since the first couple of reviews I did about him that he was very well aware of. You know, I think he was much more careful about that thing after that. But I think that things like liars, things like people that gaslight other people, things like downplaying or kind of pretending like you're not having a manipulative influence over other people is another huge one. Like Stephen, when he was trying to cover the Bob Seven thing, Bob Seven very clearly in the wrong, very clearly like this dude has done some fucked up stuff. But the idea that like Destiny didn't have influence over these women that he brought together and had private conversations with and shared details, like the idea that he didn't have some kind of like influence over those people, the direction of their conversation, these sorts of things is like simply untrue. And like I cannot allow that to like continue to be a talking point, you know? Even if it's uncomfortable to point that out, even if he's somebody who I enjoy, who I want to be friends with, who I respect, you know? Who, you know, could benefit my career or who could ultimately end it. If he woke up tomorrow and decided like, I'm going to treat Booksmarts the way I treat Vosh, and I'm going to talk shit about him all the time, and I'm going to look up shit about him and like look up quotes from him, you know, like if he wanted to do that, he could do that tomorrow and probably be more or less successful at it, you know? So that's something to always worry about. But, in much the same way that I feel like there's a responsibility we have about platforming because of X and Y and Z, I think we have a responsibility to point things out if we think that there is like a community benefit to that outweighs the personal risk. And I think that like pointing out that people are lying or pointing out that some of these behaviors and debates or conversations are things where like, I'm willing to make that jump. This person's not going to like me after I say this, but I'm willing to make this jump because I need other people to know that if this happens to them, you're not crazy. You're not wrong because a bigger creator said that it happened one way. You know, I want to help those people because I feel really bad for those people. I feel bad for people that came out of panel shows thinking that those panels were hosted with the intent of actually going through ideas or having better discourse, right? People that are disillusioned. I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for those people. And so I try to like pave a way forward for anybody that's coming after me that might run into these things. And that's definitely on the forefront of my mind when I do the reviews.
Do you have a favorite panel show? Or do you think they're all just garbage?
Well, they're not all garbage. They're just like I wouldn't call McDonald's garbage. I like McDonald's. When I have a hankering for McDonald's, you know, like
we like McDonald's in my stream too, don't worry.
And so man, if I had to pick one, the one that Aiko and Freems hosted, I liked the most. That's what I would say. I don't know if it's still going or what they would call it nowadays. They hosted a panel that I really liked. A4 Andre, of course. That's the best panel, hands down. Any panel that A4
That's
Andre is
before my
moderating.
time. I never, because he doesn't host panels anymore, right?
No, but he's an incredible host. He's amazing. His social intelligence is just off the fucking charts. The dude is really, really good with people, really good with transitioning, really good at like managing the mood and reading the room and exerting authority in a very, very authentic and natural way. Like he handles situations that I think other people would be like, that's so uncomfortable. I don't know how I would do that. How do I shut people up when they're dominating my show? How do I assert like my position as a host without coming off like an uppity asshole? Like he walks this line of everything so well that like Vosh, I think he's like a really good rhetoric guy. He's very, very aware of the audience and of the people around him. And he changes the way that he's handling people to address that. And not in some like mischievous way, but like almost like a host of a dinner party going between the different groups and like, oh, Mary, snakes. I know you work at the zoo, blah, blah, blah. Richard, we going shooting later? Huh? Ski.
Oh my God,
you know,
so
like...
good. Yeah.
Something like that. Like that's A4 Andre, and I love that about him. He's an amazing dude for that.
Yeah, that social intelligence is really interesting. Sorry if you can hear my dog in the back. She's scratching the ground. Zelda, stop. It's really interesting that you bring up social intelligence because I feel like that stuff gets downplayed so much, especially in these circles. Zelda, stop. She's a Samoyed. They like to dig. They're Arctic dogs. But yeah, I think social intelligence just gets like totally downplayed when it's such an important skill. God damn it, she's still stuck. Zelda, I'm actually gonna kill you. No, I'll send you back to Siberia. But uh, do you think that social intelligence is more important than other forms of intelligence?
That's tough because it's like it depends on what you mean by important. Like, is it useful? Like, for
Maybe when it comes
sure.
to debating.
When it comes to debating,
Yeah.
it can be, but I feel like the people that are very like socially adept like realize that they don't want to debate in the way that other people want to debate. So I'm not sure. I feel like once you would have that ability, you would kind of be turned off by debates altogether, especially panels and stuff. Like unless you're in a position of power, I'm not sure that you would want to like engage in those conversations because you'd be able to see through like how things are working very, very quickly.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Give me a moment. I'm just gonna deal with Zelda.
You're good. You're good.
Killing me. Okay, problem solved.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, she's fine. She's just sitting pretty now. Um, so do you have any like really controversial views that have gotten you in trouble in the past?
I'd say the most trouble I've been in has been or the most I've felt the heat because I got death threats and shit from it was criticizing a Kurzgesagt video about climate science, and that's the only time I've like that was the
You
last
got
time
death
that I
threats
like
for that?
yeah
Holy shit.
yeah and so I would say that that's probably the one that I got the most flack for. But like I get flack from all these communities all the time because I attack their creators, particularly the DGG community, and they're all like smart enough to where they can like create these like weird arguments that like work in a vacuum as to like why the advice or why the critique is like unfounded, but like it's completely divorced from the reality of a like they always come up with like some crazy explanation for how things are the way that they aren't, you know. They're kind of like the QAnon people. They create a narrative to like arrive at particularly strange conclusions all of the time. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it would be the climate science thing was probably the biggest one that I got flack for.
Do you ever have like a moment where you're kind of want to criticize a certain creator? Like,
All the time.
Even though you know you should, right?
All the time.
Oh, I'm
Almost
so
every
glad that
single
you're
review.
honest. I fucking admire that. Like, holy shit. Yeah. So tell, like, I don't know, what's an example of what's a good example of one of those?
Yeah, the Richard Wolff one was a huge one. Everybody thought that Stephen had won. And they were talking shit on this Wolff guy. Even the socialists were talking shit on the Wolff guy. And they were saying that, man, he had the floor. What the fuck was he talking about? He didn't answer a single fucking question. Like, they were talking mad shit on this dude.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going line by line through it. And I'm like, when it's written down, it's very clear that he's answering all of these questions. And when you look at it line by line, Stephen looks like he's completely obtuse and that he's choosing not to like listen for these things. But rhetorically, Wolff clearly lost because both the audience and Stephen didn't understand what the fuck he was talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like that was one where it's like, do I point this out? Should I cover this at all? Like if I have this contrarian take, like that's great for the clicks and whatever, but like it also means that I'm going to get a lot of flack from this community. I have to do a very, very good job of presenting the case that this is how it's working out. Another one would probably be calling saying that the serfs is either unintelligent or bad faith was another huge one where it's like I've sat through this debate and other debates of his multiple hours. I've taken notes on all of them. This person is either like purposefully becoming like an obstruction to a conversation, purposefully not listening, purposefully like misinterpreting what the other person is saying, or they're simply unintelligent. They just did not understand what the person had said over and over and over. They didn't understand what the moderator meant when they told them to not do that or when they intervened. They simply didn't understand like the criticism of their argument. They simply did not understand what that question was, right? And that was one where it's like, I've sat through this and I have no other explanation. This person is either like purposefully doing this and they're acting in bad faith, or it's all an accident and they're just not like the brightest bulb in the brick factory, right? And they just struggle with this. But almost every review, when I come across like, this is the main thing that's the problem with this person, it's super difficult. Saying that Prime Kai needs to work on his stutter, like, people are going to say it's ableist. People are going to say that, people are going to fight me about it. Like, despite like whatever my background is in researching that, or despite like the therapies that I'm well aware of, or despite like, you know, like, it's just every single thing that I do, every single critique, I feel that for like, yeah, I feel that all the time.
Okay, it's really weird, and I'm being 100% honest with you. Like, I swear on every god that has ever existed in history. Okay, I'm totally honest. I have never heard one bad thing about you. Like, not ever, right? And you're speaking like you get so much criticism. And in a way, it's kind of like, this is probably really sick of me, right? I'm probably a bad person, but it's kind of making me happy because it's like, I feel like that all the time. So where I get like so much fucking like I feel like I'm getting all this criticism, and it makes me feel like the whole world hates me. And I'm not assuming that you think the whole world hates you, but it's interesting that you seem to also hyper focus on, like, you know, you seem to accept or take a ton of negative criticism, when I hear rumors and negative shit all the time about people, and I've just never heard a bad thing about you. Like, it was always only positive things.
I'm happy that's the case.
Yeah, who are you paying? Who are you paying? How's that happening?
Destiny.
What if Destiny was like the overlord of the soul? And in a way, he kind of created it. The one thing I have heard about you is that you are a Destiny orbiter, right? Yeah, that was the term. But I've heard that described for a lot of people. And in a way, this whole community was created because of him, right? He was like one of the first political kind of streamers. So in a way, everyone is a Destiny orbiter. But how would you respond to that kind of criticism?
I mean, like, is it a criticism? I feel like it's an observational thing, and like it depends on how people define the orbiter thing. Like, is orbiting meaning that like if he does something, I will cover it? Because if that's the case, that's a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
If Steven has some big debate, almost everybody covers it or talks about it, right? It's newsworthy on the website. So if they made it in that way, that's innocent enough. That covers enough people that it shouldn't mean negative. It shouldn't mean positive. Like, it's just like a statement of fact. If they mean that it's like I hang out with him and that I'm one of the people that supports him, that's fine. That's not negative either. Yeah, I do hang out with him. I do support him. If it means that like I don't know, there's so many positive ways or like neutral ways of interpreting it that I just don't pay it too much mind. I don't care too much about the orbiter comments, really. I care more about like saying I have DGG brain rot. That bothers me. That's annoying to me. Like,
what does that mean when people say that? Like, what do they mean by it?
I think it, like, if I had to give my definition, it's like you're compromised by this dude, that like the opinions that you have about him are so influenced by like what he tells you about himself that you're not to be trusted about your like opinions of him, or that you engage in these mental gymnastics, the seeds of which were planted by Destiny to defend Destiny. So like if Destiny's getting criticism from a community that's more or less justified, but he says that these fucking lefties, I feel like I do something and everybody treats me with this standard, but when everybody else does something, they don't get treated that way, and then everybody uses that as a defense for him, right? And I think that's the brain rot, is when you see the arguments repeated from like the seeds that he gave these people and it's like unfounded, then that's where it's problematic. I'd say that's how I would like that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I feel like so many people have that reaction. We're not treating this person equally or something like that. Something that's been interesting, like watching, I'm kind of new to these communities, and I'd heard of Destiny before I kind of started streaming, but I barely knew like anyone. I didn't even know Vosh. Like, I didn't know anyone in the crowd or anything. And something that I've heard, right, was that, so Vosh came from Destiny's community, but Vosh is technically much larger now, right? In terms of like, If I'm correct, I might be wrong on that one. Um,
I guess
do you,
he is, yeah.
well, if he is, like, assume he is, for the sake of the question, why do you think that is? If you were to guess.
Well, I mean, like, it comes back to where his strength is. He understands like what an audience is looking for in a reply, or what is distasteful to an audience in a reply. So Vosh makes it a priority to keep the audience with him the entire time he's walking along with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that reflects in his numbers. You know, if you cater to the vast majority of people, and if you're very careful about sticking to what that common narrative is, even if it's like not necessarily aligning with what you believe in or how you believe in it, I think that you can be very, very, very successful. I think that we see this particularly in Hassan, where it's like Hassan more or less seems to go, and he feels where the wind is, and then he goes, all right, we're going that way. That's what we're doing today. You know, like, I think if you're willing to do that and you're good at playing up to that, then you can be very, very, very successful. And I think that is something that Stephen doesn't do. As a matter of fact, it almost seems like, and this is not to give a ton of like credence to like the contrarian criticism that's coming to him right now from the Vosh community, but you know, he seems much more interested in a position he can take that's in opposition to people than one that is where we're both in agreement. Agreement bores him so much that he's looking for conflict, and he's out seeking fights with people and communities, and that's, you know, over time going to, you know, put him farther behind other people, I think, because you're either with him and you're bought into the personality of the dude, or you're just not. You know, if you're just a normal person that's drifting back and forth, like, oh, this guy's an asshole, he's being a total dick, like, all right, well, I'm not watching this dude anymore. And that's all it takes for most people, I think.
Do you think it's possible to do, say, what you described Hassan or Vosh doing really well, and simultaneously be really good with, you know, be like logical in your arguments, put out really responsible arguments and like good quality streams?
Yeah, I think Vosh is like a good example of that. I think Vosh does a much better job at striking that balance than Hassan does, right? Like, and that's why I tried to transition over to like using Hassan as an example, because he's frankly a much better example of that. I think Vosh works a lot harder to strike this balance that you're talking about than Hassan does.
Yeah, that totally makes. I haven't watched a lot of Hassan streams, but it seems like a big part of why people watch him is because he's funny, right? Like he's got like a humorous aspect to him. It's kind of moved away from the politics debate kind of stuff. But from my understanding, that's kind of initially what he was doing. Was he was doing more debating.
And it's a smell test for people. It's tougher for people nowadays to accept the humor and accept like those parts of somebody's personality if they know that like low key this is a Republican person that doesn't want me to be able to marry the person that I love. Or this is somebody that would force me to have that kid that I needed to get aborted because I was raped. You know, like they're knowing the political positions of people can turn you off of them, even if they're a completely enjoyable person. I think that's the case for a lot of people nowadays. So, you know, I think that it is important that he had those political things, and that every time we hit the topic of politics, which happens a lot on his stream even now, that then he has the right commentary, he has the right opinions. I think that's like a huge part of it, because even if he had all this personality, if he had the wrong opinions on politics, I don't think he would be as successful of a streamer. But maybe that's you know, speaking beyond what I could be sure of, but that would be my assumption.
I think that there is one of the problems is like the incentive structure within Twitch and like what gets you views, what gets you money, like all of that kind of stuff. Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to earn some kind of living, or help with our living and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, I know that there's some people who have told me in a very rude way that they give zero fucks about money. But I think that's very rare. I think that's very, very rare. And I still have a feeling that person was lying. Yeah, I think most people still do. They care about money, at least like to a certain extent. So with all that incentive structure like in mind, how does, you know, what advice would you give other people who are trying to start streaming and they want to balance, you know, their ability to kind of make money and be strategic in that sense but at the same time still be responsible and still put out quality arguments and quality content?
I honestly, I feel like I'm compromised. I don't feel like I'd be able to give them good advice. Because I remember being in that position and wanting all of those things, and it changes when you're aware of how things work. And it changes when you're faced with like the practical reality of the website. I would say if you want to do all those things, go stream on YouTube. That's what I would say. That would be my advice. Stream on YouTube. Make YouTube videos, because you're going to be much more satisfied with your YouTube videos and with YouTube than you are going to be with Twitch. And that's something you should prepare yourself for mentally, emotionally, and monetarily right now. And that's something you should accept, that other people on this platform, even if they say that that is their stated goal, it will not align with the actions that they're engaging in. And you need to be well aware of that as well moving into this, that you need to not assume good faith of everybody that you talk to, because everybody else, like you said, is compromised by these incentives. And whether that's clear and apparent to you or not, it's something you need to factor into like every conversation that you have with people. And I just think it's very difficult to accomplish all those things on this website and be successful. I'm not sure if you could do that.
Because that's something that I'm totally struggling with right now. There's especially the Israel-Palestine thing kind of started up. It came into the news a few weeks ago. There's like a big flare-up with violence. And so suddenly, like, a lot of people started watching me for my content on Israel-Palestine, since they knew that was kind of like my focus. And so naturally I started getting way more criticism about it, way more than I was used to, right? Sorry. So for example, like, my views tend to be pretty balanced, I guess, like on the subject. But right now, in terms of, what's popular and what's very trendy to have, like, the type of views to have is to be like super, super anti-Israel, like believe that Israel's committing a full genocide. And if you don't think that, and if you don't like want Israel totally wiped off the map and like bombed out of existence, you're like, you're being dishonest, or you're a shitty person or something like that. And it feels like there's this huge incentive structure, especially for me as a Jewish person, to kind of be like, no, like, you can use me as like, your token, or whatever. And, like that you can argue that, oh, you're not being anti-Semitic because this Jewish person says this. That's okay. And I know that there's a huge incentive structure, because my views where I'm critical of Israel get way more views than when I'm not critical of Israel. I get way more positive responses in general from Twitter, from YouTube, from Twitch, when I'm incredibly critical of Israel. And so I totally notice there's like this subtle incentive that starts happening, where it's like just naturally, it starts telling me like, oh, do more streams on being critical of Israel. Do more streams on this stuff. Downplay any kind of things that make Israel look better. Focus on things that make Israel look worse, because right now that's where the tide is going. And it's like, but I also know that I would just be lying, right? Not that Israel doesn't deserve tons of criticism, it does, but I definitely don't think to the extent of what I'm seeing on like Twitter and stuff is honest. And it's definitely not something that's accepted as a fact by like by the diplomatic like community. So anyway, so yeah, that's been really, really frustrating for me, and especially to notice that about myself, that like I was like, wow, like what if I'm compromised? Because that incentive structure is just so strong, and like keep competing for the numbers. Do you find that you've had those moments kind of yourself, right? Because you're also like, you're also a streamer, and you've been doing it a bit longer than me, but I know that, I'm sure that you've had some kind of similar struggles with it.
Yeah. This may be the case for you. I know it's for sure the case for me, but I may be in a privileged position. But having a contradictory opinion, given my kind of content, is actually like the beneficial thing. So like, if I find a narrative that is one that is not being covered by other people, that's generally what is like guiding a review. So if I see everybody is talking about how like Wolf failed, he didn't answer questions, yada yada, but I'm looking at the notes and he dead ass answered like every single question that was posed to him in what I think is a very satisfying way that is perhaps like more than you even needed, right? It's like he's trying to explain it to somebody who's at like a level 1 understanding of whatever the concept is. So when I see those are the opportunities I see to like make my voice heard, or like those are valuable takes to have. So for me, at least, the incentive structure seems to be in favor of like contradictory opinions on stuff. Now, I have no doubt that I could just like react Andy it and say, wow, he's wiping the floor with this stupid fucker and blah, blah, blah. You know, like I could do that and be funny about it. And maybe that would be more successful. But from my point of view, the most valuable insights I have are those that are not in line with like what the narrative around something is. And that's in large part because a lot of the insights that I have, or like a lot of the opinions I have, I would like to think more than other people on the platform is based on exactly what happened in the conversation, because everything that I'm saying is by quotes. Everything that I'm saying is with timestamps. Everything that I'm saying is with like a bullet point outline of the entire argument in front of me. So when I have these conclusions and I'm done with the notes, like those are incredibly valuable positions to bring to light because supported by evidence in the conversation. I'm interested to hear a counter narrative that may be able to fight against these beliefs, and I think they're well founded. So a lot of the time, those are good things to pick, and I don't think that you should fight against that. Even in your case, like we want to be financially successful on here. So there's a balance, right? And it's the same thing with like the socialist and paying people and the capitalism thing. It's not black or white. Like there's a balance there. You can see an economic opportunity for you in terms of like, okay, the coverage of this Israel thing, all the eyes believe that Israel is awful. How can I work around that? Well, if I have an opposite opinion of that, there's a ton of fun ways to work around that. Maybe I can buy people in by thinking that I'm like that. We'll start off the stream going through a lot of the criticisms that I think are founded and warranted and build some rapport with the audience. And then I'm going to hit them with some things that I don't feel are warranted because I've earned their trust and I've earned their respect as somebody who is not out of their fucking mind. And I'm going to try and like pull them away from that extreme more towards a middle understanding of what's going on. I think there's a lot of fun ways to handle that. So I don't know. Does that help at all?
Yeah, that does. I actually feel like I've tried that in my most recent stream and it kind of worked out really well. So yeah, so that I do think that that's some good advice. It's interesting that you brought that up. And I do think just in general, when you earn people's trust that you are going to be someone that follows truth, or at least follows what you observe as truth, and that you've got good arguments and stuff, they're more likely to believe the other criticisms you have that are going to be a little more controversial. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Have you watched I don't know if you've ever seen any of my content on Israel Palestine, but do you have any constructive criticism that I guess?
I don't have any constructive criticism. I've watched a little bit of it. It's just sometimes the way some people, I don't know if they're in your community or not, sometimes the way that people treat you makes me feel really bad.
What? Really?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes people are, I think, more mean to you than I think they ought to be. Or sometimes people are like really, really rude. And I always feel bad because I know that you take that shit to heart. And knowing that you take stuff to heart, anytime I see people like be rude to you, it's like, man, like if you've watched her long enough, she takes this shit to heart. Why would you type that out? Like, I don't know. Like you clearly have an intention to hurt her with that, and that's like not cool. And yeah, that's frustrating. Like with the no comment chick thing, like I felt really bad because it's like it's clear this no comment chick person is like up to no fucking good around here. Okay, like they're the person whose face we see when we pull the mask off the evil person in Scooby-Doo, right? So like they're up to no good, and it's just it's sad to see you trying to figure out, well, whoa, what the fuck do I do with this? Like that's not the reality of what happened. This person's being this way, but like I want to be nice to them, and I want to like maybe they're thinking about things differently, or like like you're struggling to find like a more charitable interpretation of what's happening to you. And I think that that's always a sad position to see, like maybe kinder and more compassionate people on the website in. And I've seen that like over and over with like everything from panel shows to debates where people are just like Well, like they're at a loss because their system is not going to like provide, any helpful insights on how to deal with this person that's in front of them.
So you think I should be meaner? Is that the...
No, I just think there has to be a way to triage, like I said this on Steven's stream, but I think helpful advice to other creators that aren't like Destiny, where they have a flick, a switch that's flicked off in terms of like feeling bad about comments in their head. If you naturally feel bad about them, you need to find a way to triage those comments before you like really take them to heart. And he told me that, people are going to feel the way that they're going to feel when they initially see the comment. But I think that's because he doesn't understand the nuance of like how people emotionally interpret things. I don't think it's really an instant thing. I think it's a stewing thing. There is an instant like pang of like, oh, that's not a nice thing to say. But it's the stewing on it that hurts. And that's something I asked you about in that stream where you were talking about the comments you were getting is like, it seems like it's the stewing on it that hurts, and we should choose which comments we stew on or which comments we take to heart. And I think to do that, we need to triage them. We need to see, what is the person that's saying this? Where is this coming from? Like if it's in the case of Irene, like, okay, what is the history of this Irene person? How do they engage with drama? How do they engage with other creators? Are we seeing a pattern of behavior here that could explain like how we should act moving forward, or like how we should take to heart whatever they're saying here? There definitely is. And so you have to be careful about that. In the same way with Vosh, like if he starts telling me that some shit happened that is completely different from how I remember it, I have a red flag that pops up in my head that should pop up in Vosh's head, but I have to pop up in my head that says, let's go ahead and check this. Let's check the transcript. What actually happened here? Even if that's frustrating, and this just a lot of frustrating people to deal with on the website, and we just have to figure out coping strategies for them.
That is such good advice. You should do like some kind of like self-help segment on your stream. Because like you're actually really good at it. It's like a unique combination of like rational argumentation plus like self-help stuff, which rarely has that. So it's really cool. You're like, no.
It's helpful.
I bet you're like, no, I don't want to do self-help. But
well, I've done like life smart stuff before, but and I do like an advice. Yeah, like if I go on a rant where I talk about like, here's something that I learned when I was a kid, and maybe it will help you guys, because we all had different parents, we all had different like people we respected and role models in our life. Let me share with you the lessons I got from mine and like what I live by. Those seem to be super helpful to people, so maybe I should think about that more.
Yeah, no, I would 100% watch that because that was really, really good advice that you just gave me. There is like one last question that I want to ask you that's really, really important. It's a really, really big deal. So this is probably the heaviest. So like, yeah, just, you're sitting down, right? I guess? Okay.
Yes.
What is with this whole thing with people calling you like a book fucker? Like, I don't understand.
Okay.
Like, and I want to hear the real story, like the deep part of the story.
Sure. Well, I can go very, very deep on this one. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah, let's go as deep as possible.
The way I do with my books. When basically there was a little clip of Destiny, and he was talking about what his strategy was going into a very frustrating debate that he was about to have with, I believe it may have been like Jack AM or somebody. But he basically said, honestly, what I tried to do is I try to imagine that book fucker is watching this and he's gonna like be talking all this shit and whatever. And so I try to think like, what would that dumb fuck say about this? And like, that book so fucker was like such a good little line. And I guess that caught a lot of traction, and I feed into it a lot. Like,
I mean, it's a good nickname.
I think so. I think I like it.
Yeah, that's actually, and it rolls off the tongue much more than like evil with a pretty face or something that I've gotten. So yeah, book fucker. I like that. It's very, very cool. Well, I was just about to call you book fucker. Well, Booksmarts. Thank you so much for like honestly coming on and doing this interview. We've been trying to set it up for a while, and I like was so insanely disorganized that I messed it up. But yeah, this has been literally amazing. To get to talk to you is so cool because everyone in my stream is always saying, like, you've got to talk to Booksmarts. Booksmarts is amazing. Booksmarts is amazing. Like, you guys have to be in the same room. Like, so it's been really cool. You're so freaked out. But yeah, it's been so cool to get to talk to you. And, yeah, and I just think it's so cool that someone like you streams on Twitch. I had such a bad opinion about Twitch before I knew too much about it. Like, I just assumed if there was Twitch politics, it was going to be really low tier kind of stuff. I sound like such a fucking snob, but whatever.
That's true.
You're like, yeah. And just the fact that there are people like you, and you're 21 years old, which is depressing for me. Emotionally.
I'll be 24 in maybe a week.
Still depressing. Point still stands. But it's extraordinary. Like, it's extraordinary. It really is. So yeah, I'm gonna kill you with compliments. But yeah, it's been really, really cool. And I appreciated that you stood up for me with the Irene thing. That shit, when someone stands up for me, it's like, it's a weight in my heart, you know? You've got my loyalty. Aww. So it means a lot. Yeah, so do you want to talk a bit about what you do on your stream, and when you stream and all of that kind of stuff?
Sure. So, and if there's ever anything that your community brings up that they want to talk with me about, I'd be happy to come back on. It's been a pleasure talking to you. On my stream, I do the debate reviews. People know about that. Basically, unlike React Andes that kind of just react in real time and pause the video and make jokes, I prepare an entire, notes document, or I have a bunch of physical notes ready to go through and have educated opinions on things to be able to reference back. So that's most of like what I'm known for content-wise. However, on my stream, I do all sorts of stuff. Like you said, I thought you lay on beds. That was my impression of you. Yeah, I do bed streams. I chat with people. I give advice. I have an email, askbooksmarts@gmail.com. And when people send their stories or problems that are happening there, I'll occasionally dip into those and give people some advice. And yeah, we basically talk about anything. You can come in there and ask me a question, and I'll try to handle it in the same way I handle it here, plus or minus some, humor and poking fun at you, But
I've actually heard your streams are really funny. Apparently you have a better Valley Girl voice than me, which is a little offensive, but it's okay. I'm not bitter or anything.
Well, I would do it, but I don't want to, put you on the spot. And
yeah, how dare you? Okay. You can't do that shit on my stream. I'm the only Valley Girl here. Well, yeah, like, I think, yeah, we put your link in chat, and thank you so much for coming and talking to me and everything. And we should hang out and talk again. I want to hear you review some of my content, even though a part of me is really scared, but I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it because I want to learn more than I'm scared. So, yeah, that would be super, super cool.
Yeah, of course. I'll keep an eye out. And I'll probably try to check out the Israel stuff, although it's so tough because like I'm totally uneducated on any of that stuff, and it's just
don't worry, everything I say is completely true, so it's totally fine.
Amazing. Full faith.
Yeah. Okay, well, have a good rest of your day, Booksmarts. See ya.
Bye. Enjoy the stream, everybody.
Bye. God, he is such a pleasure to talk to. He makes me feel so bad about my age. You guys like the interview? That was wholesome. I'm glad. I'm so glad that you like that interview. Yeah, I feel really good about that one. That's definitely a feeling where it's like afterwards. Remember I talked about the feeling that was like, oh, like I just created really good content? Like, yeah, I got that feeling.